Can this side of the room look up Psalm 14, and then this side of the room look up Psalm 53? So glad you have colored markers. At Awaken, when I first taught, and ever since, I have... Well, when we first... No, they took it down now, which is sad, but... Wow, guys, this is all for me? You guys should... we filled, like, the entire wall. Like, I wrote on the entire wall for the whole week. It was awesome. But I won't do that, obviously. I'll respect your walls. Anyway, okay, so you guys, somebody read? I don't remember which one
14?
Yeah, so...
Only fools say in their hearts there is no God. They are corrupt and their actions are evil. Not one of them does good. The Lord looks down from heaven on the entire human race. He looks to see. Is this the right one?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
And then, can you guys read? What do you guys have?
53.
Okay. Somebody read that.
Yeah. Only fools say in their hearts there is no God. They are corrupt and their actions are evil. Not one of them does good.
Okay. Did you read? Is that 53?
That's 53 verse 1.
Okay. And yours?
18 verse 1.
Okay. So, the Bible has a repeat chapter, pretty much. It's like one of the few in there, but it's in the same book. Okay. Why would that be the case?
It's important.
Is it important? Yes, it probably is important. I think the importance is pretty early on. It says the fool says where? Wow, sorry, you can't read that. Okay. What? Oh, man. Wow, that's not very good. I shouldn't tell you I go to school for architecture when you see the way I grew up. He's like, wow, I'm going to go to Harvard for architecture if I can do that. Anyway, so my mentor in undergrad, he was like, Christian, everybody makes decisions about Jesus, and it comes from like a place in their heart. And so I had been an atheist in high school, grew up in the church, and then I got really into philosophy on purpose. I mean, it wasn't like I accidentally... Like some people are like, I really got into pornography and it's really bad, and I was like, really got into philosophy and lived a wild life studying Marx, all at the age of 13. So, yeah, that was my life. I didn't do bad things necessarily, but I was like very active mind as a very young child. I am afraid of the children my fiance and I are going to have. I'm already afraid of them. She went to Harvard Law. And oh, man. Yes, they'll probably tell us exactly what to do and where to go from the age of 2. Anyway, so in the midst of that, I struggled deeply with race, with being poor. I'm 5 different nationalities, so or ethnicities rather. I'm African, Chinese. I'm equal parts. So my dad, he's like equal parts African, Chinese, French, and Spaniard. Everybody met in Cuba, so I'm also Cuban. Then my mom is Italian. She's Italian. So we get great food from either side of the family. But grew up in Union City, pretty poor. and not like destitute, but I was very aware very early on of disparities and like when things didn't match up and like, well, like when you live in this section, you're a particular ethnicity. When you live in this section and have these opportunities, you're this type of person, or you're not X type of person. And because of my racial ambiguity, like when people meet me, when I'm in Kona, everybody thinks I'm Samoan, like, or I'm from the island. And when I'm in Thailand, people think I'm Thai. When I'm in China, they're like, "Oh, you mixed blood." And I was like, "Okay." Like I was playing basketball one day, and they were like, "Oh, you're so good at basketball because you're mixed blood. You're like Kobe." And I was like, "Yeah, okay, all right." I mean, I'm not going to deny that I think I'm better at basketball because I'm Hispanic and black than Chinese. My brother's a pro. He like played in the pros, and he's always like, "I'm not Chinese." And I say I am Chinese. I'm like studying. No, I'm kidding. It's just all these different things coming together, right? But I think that's what's difficult, because when you look at how all the different things come together, and they create different ways of thinking. Whenever you go to like different societies, they think very, very differently and use. And they don't. I think when we look at them, we typically think you think differently because you're either operating with reason or you're not. Like you have been educated or you have not been educated. We basically have two categories in our mind. Educated people who have a rigorous form of study and analysis and critique, and people who have not been educated in a certain methodology and modality of like knowledge and critique. Now, I'm going to forewarn you. If I get really passionate about things, I will use a lot of big words, and so I will try to explain them, but you might have to look it up, right? I might say like, well, we're going to probably get into really quickly. I know I don't have a lot of time. The ecological infrastructures of the kingdom, and that's like kind of what I want to talk to you about today. But yeah, I'm not going to write it out because I will. I try to write things up, and when it's such a small board, I kind of feel afraid. Anyway, not afraid to do it, but I just know it's going to take time. Anyway, as I'm saying, you kind of look at things that they are or they're not. I think growing up, I looked at my dad, and I was like, yeah, he's not. I mean, he's college educated and he's a professor, but in my mind, he's like, nah. He does things in a very like Hispanic way, whatever that means. I mean, I know what that means, but like we show up late, like we just like he'll take forever to tell us something like that could have taken like 5 sentences. He'll like tell us 10 stories about. I'm like, oh, Dad, just tell them, like, yes, I also like rice and beans. You don't have to tell us, like, the entire, how it smelled in the kitchen, da-da-da-da-da. And, like, my whole Spanish family's like that, and they're loud. And my mom was like, oh, they're so loud. Like, it's, like, New Year's, and there'd be, like, dominoes, like, going around on the table. And everybody's like, and it's, like, 4 a.m, and everybody's, like, really loud. And, like, yeah, come on, Mackie. And, like... Yeah, my mom's like, oh, I'm trying to go to sleep. And so, anyway, so in my mind there was rationality, which was like the way you were if you were going to be successful and think correctly about the world, right? And then there was like irrationality, which was embodied by like my other half of me, that I was like desperately trying to separate myself from, right? But these rationalities, one is not better, one's just in power. Right? So we see more demonstrations of like Western power at large than we do of like other cultures' power. So by default, their reasoning seems like it's authoritative, right? Because it got stuff done. Like the West took over the world. Like they obviously have something going for them. Might makes right. Embedded in that, and I'm skipping over a whole bunch of like theory and logic, and because I only have an hour, but. Embedded in that is just this, like you begin to just think this is the way to do things. This is the way to think correctly. This is the way to move forward. So I have to abide by these different rules. Now, when you go to like, so like the different expressions of Christianity, like you'll go to like a Hispanic church and like people will be like, super emotional and even just notice that terminology that I just used, right? As soon as you hear like, oh, they're super emotional in that church, what do you automatically think? If they're super emotional, they're not, what? Oh, Korean.
No, crying.
Oh, crying. I think you said Korean. I was like, yeah, sure. But if they're super emotional, they're crying. But what is that inherently like? Are those people you should trust making decisions? No. Who should make decisions? Intellectuals. And what are they like? Are they? And what does that? What does logical mean to you? When somebody said, when you heard that I was from Harvard, what did you expect? No, like just top of your mind. I don't even want you to like not try to insult me. Smart aleck. That was a nice way of saying it. What else?
I guess like more head and less heart.
More head. Okay, what else?
Pretty structured, systematic.
Other like, you know, I'll tell you what I think of like boring. There you go. Say it. That's what I want to hear. Keep it real. Keep it 100.
Open-minded, because Harvard encourages critical thinking.
Open-minded.
You can support your theories.
Did you say open-minded?
Yeah.
Open-minded, or did you mean like super liberal? Is that nice speak for? I'll tell you what I thought. Since being a kid, like growing up in that environment, at the age of 9, I was like, I want to go to Princeton. That's not like your typical kids. Like, at the age of 9, I wanted to go to Princeton because I didn't want to be emotional, non-white. I would always wake up. I would always like. I used to. I'm old, so I used to watch Saved by the Bell, and I would see Zach. Do you remember Zach?
Yeah.
Like, right? He's white. He has blonde hair. Like, fell in this particular way, and all the girls loved him. And I would always think, like, maybe I look like him. Like, I don't want to look like Slater. He's like a meathead. Like, but Zach is cool. But then I would always get surprised when I looked in the mirror and I wasn't white and didn't have blonde hair. And I was like, yeah. Maybe it's going to change later on, but never did. Okay, emotional, non-white. I think pretty early on, I knew like I could always make money. I didn't feel like I could make money, and I think it's something I still work through. But I always associated these things with, you could be richer than me, I can't control that. Like you could be more powerful than me, I can't control that. But if I could control being smarter than you, and if I'm smarter than you, there's nothing you can do to take that away from me, and I will always beat you any day of the week. And so for me, to be in power meant. So I wanted power, I wanted money, but more, that really wasn't the goal. The goal was to be smarter. And to be smarter, and these things were encapsulated by embracing a way of thinking, but a way of life. That way of thinking emerged from a way of life that we've been taught in America is a particular thing and looks a very particular way, right? You dress a particular way, you're reserved, you're boring, you have an open mind, which just means like you will make things make sense that are just dumb, right? You'll be able to rationalize why an orange is actually black, or why blue is actually a code word for, psychedelic. All these strange things that the average person's like, it doesn't matter, right? In some ways, you're like irrelevant. You lack common sense.
You go to I'm not gonna say it.
No, say it.
You go to school. No, I'm not.
Say it. You have to now.
You go to university in Boston.
Uh-huh.
No, I'm just saying.
Oh, do I?
No, I'm saying. But you can put that on the list.
Oh.
You come to Boston for school.
Yes.
Oh, yes, sorry.
you go to some small school in Cambridge.
Yeah.
One of the two. There are a couple other. Oh, sorry, we're bad. Like there are other schools in Cambridge, but in our mind, there's only two. But yeah. So all of this. Oh, and elitism, right? Oh yeah. How could we forget that? You expected me to come in here and be like, "Hello, how are you doing?" and have tea.
We thought your hair would be a little more.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I didn't get to do it today. No, I actually purposely, as soon as I got to Yale, I was purposely dressed as like un-Ivy League as I could. I think I pulled up and there was like this. It was like one of these legacy families there, and they like pulled up in their Rolls Royce, and they like the dad and the two sons look exactly the same in their blazers, and I was like, whoa.
Don't do that.
Anyway, don't get it. Heart wounds. Anyway, all these things, this is a way of life that has been modeled for us and that embodies power, authority, and right thinking. Okay, so just because you got Christian didn't mean that changes, right? Because most of you think like the people who think like that are like more grounded and rooted in the Word, right? This, right, and we always typically, right, we demonize this, and we say, oh, this is this. If you want to know what a fool is, there you go. I mean, you also have the other kinds of fool, but that's obvious. But then this is like, yeah, the very sophisticated fool. Do you know, like, this exists in the church in a very, like, ensconced way? Because when most of you, I've never taught at a DBS before, but I think a lot of you are, like, you want to get into the core, like, what's really going on? I want to know how to talk about the Word and, like, how to study the Word and get into the Word. Like, one of the scary things about this is that you could study it backwards and forwards the rest of your life, and you will get nothing out of it. Yeah. Because it will always go back to, where is your heart? Your heart will determine whatever you get out of this. Yeah. And that's not just me talking to you. That's like history of philosophy, not even believers. Deconstructivism, the whole like movement to talk about there is no absolute truth is really a very powerful and significant thing. I don't want to... I'm actually a big believer in this whole... Do I have time to say this? Because you're going to become... Yeah, I have time to say this. I don't believe in absolute truth, okay? I know I'm in a Bible school. I don't believe in this concept. I'm trying to find it. I'll write in this so you know what I just said. I'll just say it like that. I will explain, but probably not to your liking. Maybe. I think it should. Sometimes I just like to be as offensive as possible, just to get you to think differently. So maybe I do. Where is that open-minded critique? Maybe I'm in there, and maybe I am partly this too. Whatever. Hopefully, that might be boring as well. You can determine that afterwards. Why do I say this? Right? Western constructs of thought. Basically, you can go back anywhere, but what I usually tend to go back to is Pilate. Right? Pilate brings Jesus in, and he says to him, now remember when Pilate interrogates Jesus the second time, Jesus is bleeding. He is a mess. Like, not just bleeding. I mean, that's just stating the obvious. Isaiah says he was beaten beyond the recognition of any man. So I don't know if you've seen like some of the photos that have come out of like the ISIS and some of these recent things, but like people who look you can't even, like, it's, well, anyway, I don't want to get too much into it, but it's frightening what like exists, the kinds of like atrocities that are in the world today. Jesus was beaten beyond that condition. Okay. And so think about the fact that Pilate is sitting there in all his power, looking at a man who's just been beaten and is bleeding all over the place, and he says to him, "Where do you come from?" And Jesus, like, straight up isn't begging for mercy. He isn't like, and he says like the weirdest thing. A little bit earlier, before he gets whipped, Pilate's like, "Are you a king?" Jesus is there, like he's chained up. He's like, "So you're king then?" And he says, "My kingdom is not of this world." We love to make this a big slogan. I think it's like a clothing brand and things like that. But what is very, very, very interesting about this is that Jesus says, "You're right in saying I'm a king. In fact, for this reason I was born." He's giving this lecture. He's saying this to Pilate after he's been beaten. So he says, you've got to picture it. Like, he's a mess. He's a mess. He's just a ball of blood and flesh. And he's telling Pilate, "You're right in saying I'm a king. In fact, for this reason I was born, and for this I came into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me." Now, in Revelation, and it says, after he says this, Pilate becomes very afraid. Comes in again, he says, "Where do you come from?" Like, Pilate's scared. You're talking about one of the top leaders in that area. Pilate was not afraid of Jews. He had just left thousands of Jews crucified on. You want to think about this. Like, if you walked up here and you saw people like nailed to the buildings. You need to think about hundreds of people were crucified along the way walking into Jerusalem. So you're walking into Jerusalem and you're watching like people decay, rot, and like getting picked apart on the road, right? Pilate is not afraid of any Jew. He does not care who you are. So when he's standing in front of Jesus and afraid, you've got to know that there's something about that. The experience of Jesus does something to his heart. It was nothing that Jesus said. It was what was happening in his heart. He's engaging. Suddenly, Pilate is engaging with his heart. His wife is like, "Have nothing to do with that man." He says, "My kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would have fought to prevent my arrest by the Jews. But now my kingdom is from another place." And we typically think right away, Jesus is talking about a state. He's talking about the state of the kingdom, and he's like, right? We understand things in terms of states. We can talk about nation states and like empires, different forms of monarchy, or different forms of government. But basically, it's like a state of being. Like, there is this one entity, and it's really powerful, the Roman Empire or whatever, and then other entities, and they vie for power and stuff like that. And we think of like the kingdom as this big, 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 huge juggernaut. Like if you think of the Death Star or something like that, that's basically like the kingdom, but that on steroids, right? Like, and it's not going to make stupid decisions, and So you have this notion that like, God is there with the Death Star and all the angels, and they're ready to just blow everything to smithereens if Jesus would have chosen to do that. But he doesn't. He, in his like compassion and mercy for humanity, doesn't do that. But I'm actually saying that it's something radically different that Jesus is talking about, and that's what really makes Pilate afraid. Like, deeply afraid. I think it's very interesting when people in power become afraid, and the reasons they become afraid. It's not usually because of power. It's usually because of something is happening in their hearts that they are very afraid of. Even in movies you see this, right? It's never really like the showdown. It's the click and realization, like something's going on in somebody's heart. I mean, typically, like if it's a dumb movie, it's about power. But the more sophisticated movies, Vin Diesel walks up and I don't know. I've never seen a movie with Vin Diesel in it, so I don't. I guess I'm showing that I'm from Harvard, huh? No, anyway, the idea that it's power is pretty bland. What really gets at the heart of things, like if you think about something like Macbeth, if you ever read Macbeth, like Macbeth is like committing, and his wife are committing all these atrocities and killing people because of something that's going on in their hearts. This like deep, unseated experience of these prophecies by these witches, you know. But the kingdom of God is never described in these terms. I know that we all like to think like, you know, God's like, you know, my God's not dead and he's powerful and like he could like roll over you with like whatever. It talks about chariots, talks about the armies of the Lord, but the way the kingdom of God advances is so radically different, and Jesus tried to tell people that again and again and again, and nobody got it, right? Every parable that Jesus uses are primarily, if you were to put them in a category, they're all agricultural. Every parable that Jesus uses describes the kingdom as not an army and as not a powerful entity in the way that we understand powerful entities. It describes them in the form of nature. So what does nature, I mean, I know we like to have these like wild plant movies where the plant comes in and like kills everybody, but does that happen? Or like, you know, like Little Shop of Horrors, or like we love these like carnivorous plants and we're like, oh, imagine if. But do you ever see nature doing that? Like just plants like straight up like attacking people? The timelines are radically different. I don't have a projector here or anything, but you could look at Thomas Cole, The Course of Empire. So write that down. Look it up. It's a series of famous paintings. But what it has is the same scene, and it evolves over 5 paintings, and it starts off and it's Edenic. It's the garden, pristine in all its beauty. Then it becomes Rome. Then it becomes the fall of Rome. Then it becomes the ruins of Rome that have then been reclaimed by nature. But it spans like hundreds and thousands of years, is like the painting. And it's meant to evoke this idea that nature is always going to win out. That no matter what level of civilization we reach, there is something that's going to win out. And it doesn't have to like vie for attention, it's just there. And Jesus was there, and he's saying like, the truth is something that if Jesus is not testifying to a concept. A lot of us think that truth is some kind of concept. But Jesus is saying that he's a martyr. Did he come to tell us about truth? I think Jesus' words, not what you think is the right answer in a Bible study, okay? Did Jesus come to tell us about truth?
No.
Why?
He came to save the world.
True, but he could be like representing truth. Could he still be representing that concept?
Yeah, but not truth itself by itself doesn't really save. I don't know.
Truth will set you free, right?
Yeah, but it's when it's connected to the heart.
Okay, but what if you learned something that could set you free?
But you learn to your heart.
You could.
Because if you just have it in your mind and you don't know how to like.
What if I had it in my mind and then I did it and then it connected to my heart?
Yeah.
So then it would still be a concept? It'd still be a concept in that condition.
I mean, I would say like, if you read it and you believe it, even though you don't like.
So you could believe it.
Yeah.
And then it could be powerful for you.
Yeah, so like you believe it. It's like, you're like, okay, I recognize this is the Lord, and it's not really clicking with your heart, so you would walk in it.
Okay,
in
yeah.
obedience, and then it clicks on after because.
But why? Is it because it's true? I'm splitting hairs here, I know, but I'm going to push you. Is it because it's true, or is it because what made anything true in the first place? Are we talking about what's true or what is? What I'm saying is that the reason that can happen, there's a reason that can happen. And I do believe in that process, and there's many iterations of that process. But whatever you look at that is breathed by God. So you have the person of God first. Jesus does not testify to the law, right? Jesus never says, I testify to the law. He says the law was meant to point to me. Law is this. Non-emotional, boring, like structured, rigid. Law is designed to point you to your need for truth. But it is not your need for truth. It is your need for who? So is it a need for truth, or is it a need for the person of God?
Person of God.
Truth is, there is no such thing as absolute truth. There is only such a thing as God. There is only Jesus. So when Jesus is saying truth is a man, truth is me, I am truth. He's not saying there's truth and then there's Jesus. And I came to testify, like, this is read as, often this is read as, I am Jesus and I came and I'm dying to testify to the truth.
Oh, I see.
That's a very Western construct. Right? Descartes says, cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. Right? So, he's trying to prove the reality of God. He's really earnest. He's a believer. He's trying to say, if you're in a vacuum, how do you prove the reality of God? And he's saying, well, if I doubt, I won't get into this whole thing, I'm sorry, probably open a can of words. If I doubt my existence, that means I must exist. Which means if I can doubt that I'm real, then I must be real, and only a good God would enable me to doubt that I'm real, you know? And so because I'm doubting, I know I'm real, I know God's good. Because he created a system in which I can identify what's true or not. What he did right there is split off truth from God and his ability to access it. He can access it through thought and recognize that it's good, but he didn't have to rely on personhood of God. He didn't have to rely on like the connection, the relationship of it. He simply had to rely on himself, purely himself. Jesus doesn't die to point us to the truth. Jesus dies to testify to the fact that he is truth, right? It says in Revelations, Jesus is called the faithful witness. First chapter of Revelations. He's called the faithful witness. In Greek, that's the faithful martyr. And you think, what is a martyr? Ooh, yes. Okay. So, what is a martyr? Oh, sorry. No, I'm not sorry, but that's the way it looks. That's the correct.
Someone who dies a seemingly unhonorable death for the right cause.
Okay. What else? Is that accurate? That's an accrued meaning like it's gathered that meaning over time. It originally was a legal term referring to a witness. Right? They would die. They would die. Well, so many Christians died that the word martyr wound up becoming allied with them. Why was a Christian killed?
Because of what they believed in.
Because of what they believed in, but why were very, very early Christians were killed because they witnessed Jesus.
Yeah.
Right? If I want to make sure, let's go like dumb movie, right? If I want to make sure nobody sees what I just did, what do? I kill them all. Kill everybody who has any connection to what just happened. There's always that one person who escapes, right? If you're the evil villain and they come and get you. What? You need to kill witnesses. You don't need to kill people who have like very, sophisticated, because we all know that can be twisted many different ways. You need to kill martyrs. So eventually the word martyr becomes allied with dying for what you believe in, But it really is about what you have actually witnessed happening. If you've witnessed miracles and things like that, you need to get rid of those people.
5 minutes.
Okay, cool. So if you, yeah.
I just have one question, comment. Like, so when you say that you don't believe in absolute truth, you don't believe in what we made that to believe, but you believe that Jesus is absolute truth.
I believe that
They
Jesus
are the same
is.
thing.
I believe that Jesus is.
But
Oh, I think when you, I don't have the time to explain this, and I usually take a week, but I say it just to incite you a little bit, because I think it's like jargon that we use, and it's very dangerous because it emerges out of Western culture. It emerges out of Enlightenment culture that values truth, and Kant wrote this essay called On Enlightenment, and it basically talks about like how do you get to truth without the use of any other mechanisms and tools. And so the goal is to get to absolute truth that is absolute. A human being can never arrive at and can never know these things. It just can't. And that's why you'll have many contemporary philosophers arguing with Christians and be like, you can't know absolute truth. And the Christian's like, I can know absolute truth. Totally. How dare you say that? What they're saying is legitimate. You can't know it. But what you can have is relationship. And that relationship can produce confidence in character of God, and like the knowledge of God emerges from that relationship. Outside of that, you cannot make any absolute statements. But you can say, my history with God like enables me to be confident of this. And I can't make that statement for you. You have your own story, and you have to engage. Like, your arguments to somebody else are meaningless. But if you testify to the truth, that is what witnessing is. You become a witness to the truth, or you become a propagandist. A propagandist goes and tells people things they don't know is true. And that's my last 5 minutes I'm going to try to get, or my last couple minutes. I know I'm covering a lot of things. Right, Jesus, it's about the person of Jesus. Jesus himself states that like connecting with him is truth. If you connect with something else that's not Jesus, and you use it to get to Jesus, right? Western Christianity constructs like much of Western theology emerges about truths about God, which I don't like. I study it, but I'm saying there's a certain lens in which is very dangerous, in which you think if you study the concepts of God, you will then flip the coin and get God. You don't get that, right? Because the Pharisees studied the Bible more than anybody else, and they didn't see him at all, even though he's literally standing right in front of them. They were so connected to their heart. Their heart was in a condition that they could not, your intellect only develops the condition of your heart. It articulates the condition of your heart. Your intellect does not arrive what's true, and then it changes your heart. That's not how it works. Now, it's dialogical. It goes both ways. But your heart is where it starts. You are either a fool or a wise person. That's why Proverbs says, guard your heart above all things, because it is the wellspring of life. Everything is about life. It's about oneness and separation. I'm throwing more concepts. I'm giving you my big views on the world. Anyway, I wanted to get at... so when you walk up to a person and... No, not when. Where do I want to go in my last couple points? So, most of us think if I think the right things about God, I will get God. Most of you are here because you want to know how to study Scripture, so you can get to God, right? You be diligent. You think that if you can believe the right things about God, you'll get God, right? You think that if you have right theology, it'll lead to... And A.W. Tozer says that what a man believes about God is the most important thing about him. I agree, but I will put caveats on this. What you have experienced of God is actually what's going to determine what you believe about God. Yeah. And your experiences, if this is true, your heart has experienced certain things. And this is what typically happens in Christianity. I didn't really get to finish my whole story, but this is what happened for me. My experience of how I grew up and who I was, and my experience of who I was, and my insecurities about who I was, determined what I believed. So when you become a Christian, what often happens, what happens for me, is like I believe these certain things about God. And it was like really inspiring and exciting because it's intellectually stimulating. You're like, wow, I could live a totally different life. This is like open to me. This is exciting. It's a brand new field of reality. So I buy into that, right? 10 years down the road, 5 years down the road, maybe a year down the road. This is the parable of the seeds. As soon as you start to embrace these seeds of ideas and stuff like that, this reality of the kingdom, something will come up and you will start engaging with the deepest pain of your entire life. Now that is a real experience. What will happen is you have all of us have trauma. Every single one of you in the room has trauma. Something that like deeply hurt you. You will then begin to say, I have this truth about God and I need to believe in this truth. I just need to have faith. Faith, typically for most people, is defined as like believing what you can't see, believing what you don't know is true. You just trust it because the word says it, I believe it, right? All these tropes that we hear all the time. And that is considered faith, that's considered holiness, that's considered like, those are the people you want to be like. They didn't see it, but they just walked through it. Now, I want to totally challenge that if that was the case, you wouldn't even have the Bible in front of you. If you were supposed to believe and not see, you wouldn't be reading, that wouldn't be sitting there. It's like an entire catalog of people who like had relationship with God and then took steps. Relationship precedes any step you're going to make. Experience precedes any next step you're going to make, even though the next step is something that's more radical, right? So if you, and this is where I'm coming to, during the course of this whole, and I'm setting you up for this, you are going to encounter your deepest pain and hurt, and then most of you will say that's a different category. That doesn't belong in the room right now, because right now we're studying Jesus and we're studying the Bible, and I need to like get my stuff together, you know, and hold it together so I don't become like a weird wacko like crying in the corner because like we're doing this, right? Or sorry, no, we're doing this. Right, this is the DBS school. We're like logical here. We don't get into all that weird emotional stuff that those like fire and fragrance people are in. You know, running around with flags and whatnot, right? So it's okay. I'm friends with everybody, so I know what's going on. I can see. Right. So in my mind, I was like, I'm the smart one. I'm the one that can get in Ivy League schools. I'm not the one that's going to be like rolling around on the floor anywhere. And I've done my good share of rolling around on the floor since then. But in a good way. It wasn't demons coming out, I swear. So, sorry. When you do that, that is extremely dangerous because you are saying if I would just like get my stuff together, I could then engage with Jesus, right? Wrong. The thing is, if you don't, those experiences are proof that God's not good. You have proof that God's not good, and many of you are here because you want to prove to yourself God is good, because you have experiences that totally establish you. God is mean, God hates me, God would like me just to get stuff together. I'm here because I want to know the truth of God, so when some like fire-breathing, Harvard-educated atheist comes at me, I will know exactly how to tell him like God's not dead and like, you know, prove to him X, Y, and Z. Obviously, no, I'm not a fan of this. Anyway, right? That's the culture we live in. Many of you have come here to do that. You want to prove to yourself and that voice in your head that like, God's bad, like, he doesn't like you, like, and basically that drove you here, right? He doesn't like you. If you knew more about God's word, you'd be better off. Like, you would know God better if you knew his word, but you don't know his word, and you haven't memorized enough of the Bible to really engage with him. I don't know, the list goes on and on and on. Or you're smart, and you think, like, well, I'm not going to engage in that emotional stuff. I'm going to, like, really have a logical connection to God, and yeah, that will ensure that I don't become weird and get deceived, right? You come here also so you don't get deceived because you think that happens through your intellect. When you do that, you set yourself up for disaster, because what happens is you will very soon encounter the deepest pain of your entire life, and when you have it, that is proof that God's not good. And if you've developed a very sophisticated culture in which you believe in God over here, the fact is you have never experienced any of those things. So when you say he's good, your experience looks at you, these things that you experience, once you tap, it's like a geyser, it's like one of these deep wells. You tap it, it comes out and you can't stop it. When you tap one of your deep traumas, or you have a deep trauma, there is no way in the world you'll be able to talk your way out of it. You cannot argue yourself away from deep trauma.
Yeah, that's true.
And all of us are marked by deep trauma. And that's often what leads us here, because we're like, well, I'm a mess. I need to get my life straightened out. But what we try to do, and what we mean by straightened out, is we need to cap this stuff, don't go back to it, and start getting intellectual about it, and like straighten out your life. Get yourself together. When you do that, you deny the reality of God. This book right here is not about knowing truth. It's about engaging with Jesus.
Amen. Come on.
Because his reality has to be as real and robust. The goodness of God has to be more robust than the worst trauma people have ever experienced. The worst.
Yeah.
And I know in this room, statistics say like there has got to be like a percentage of you that have been raped, or that have been abused, or that like you have gone through deep trauma. You can't escape that by becoming more intellectual. That's what I thought I could do.
Yeah.
You cannot do that. You will never find freedom from that trauma by shutting it down. The reality of God, this book makes clear that there is a God who enters time and space and desires actually to engage with your deepest pain.
Amen.
If all you came here to do is figure out how to run away from it, then that means you're also trying to run away from Jesus through the Bible. And that's why seminary is a very dangerous place, and studying the Bible is a very dangerous thing, because you can do it for precisely that reason, to get away from God and not to become closer to him. That's why you need the both. I'm sorry that I've thrown out a lot of things. I just want to pray for you guys. Yeah.